I will in short explain why the people of Urk don't trust the government. Well, very welcome everyone. We are here to meet Andrew Bridgen. We are here with a presentation from the IJsselmeer fishermen, the Waddenzee fishermen, and Jamila. And well, we want to share our experiences with the government. Well, I am here to give the very broad interpretation from how did we come here. Well, not so difficult. Driebergen, yeah. I here somewhere. You're from the west of England, and now we are here. Urk was a former island. It is surrounded by dikes. I told you, when you drove from Driebergen to here. You drive from the mainland in the polder and you're going down a meter of 5, 6. Well, the dikes are here to keep the water out. And Urk was a former island in the Zuiderzee. Very, very old. History goes back to the Roman Empire, the Germans, the Batavieren fighting against the Romans. The oldest historical note is from 962 from the German Caesar. He gives land away to some monks here on the island of Urk. So very old history, but with the rising sea level, the land shrank until there was a very small island. Then came in around World War II the plans to make a big polder, and that would be an industrial colony for the Übermenschen. Well, wait, Übermenschen? Yes. From 1850 to 1950, there was goal-oriented Nazi science. First, they thought the Urkers on the isolated island in the Zuiderzee were the last descendants from the Neanderthals. And then they thought, oh, that's not true. And they made some diagrams, the Entwicklung des Menschen. The Germans were on top, and Urkers were somewhere stuck in evolution. And there was no place for Urk, this fishing village, very sickness, arm. In the polder was a new paradise for the Übermensch. Socialists wrote articles about the Urker people, and there are quotes that we were mixed with Jews. That was 1939, just before the World War. Mixed with Jews. So you know how the Germans came here.
Yes.
Well, from 1950 to 1960, narrow-minded Urk had to disappear. It is because of there were 2 less houses after the World War. Otherwise, we were en masse deported to somewhere in the Netherlands. But there was no place in a scientifically acquired agriculture paradise that the polder have to be. From 1960 to 1990, we were always fishermen, not farmers. So we built in that time span a big fishing fleet. We had to conquer the Englishmen on the North Sea. From 1960 to 1990 kregen we de weerpremies, de wet op investering, rendement, regeling, ja. As a businessman, you can require money from the government for a new fishing vessel, bigger motors, biggest. Yeah? So there was no bad weather anymore. We can always fish. Well, everything grew, and also the victims, because the owner of the big fishing ships, he said to the crew on board, "Fish, bad weather or not, fish." So you passed the common monument over there. Yeah. All Urkers lost on sea. Every one of us has family members on that marmor plate over there. Well, in the 20th century, the fish processing industry and trade grew enormously. The big money came. The fish auction grew along. And then at the start of the 21st century, the big foreign money came. Because when you have a factory, a business, trade, and you grew above a certain level, you come in the vision of the really big mondial players. And they offer you a pot you can't refuse. Otherwise they destroy you. So what we are now experiencing on Urk, American business take over worker fish factories. Expensive workers have to leave. And arbeidsmigranten, cheap labor from abroad comes in. It is everywhere the same story here. Well, a key event, 1970, Friedman doctrine, profit maximization. Well, Friedman said, no ethics anymore. The only thing the businessman had to do is profit maximization. And the money that will generate will rain down in the samenleving, the
society. Yeah. It's called the trickle-down effect.
Yeah. The trickle-down effect. But what Friedman did not see, all the concentration of money made the business so big that they are overnames.
They take up other companies. They buy other companies.
They buy other companies. So the big Microsoft, Bill Gates, all that strange people, they are bigger than
countries.
Than the countries. And they are not democratic organizations.
No.
They are for the profit maximization. Now, since then, entrepreneurs follow the money wherever it leads. And for example, the social development goals from Europe. Well, especially the last goal is a very scary one. Living from nature, living in nature, living with nature, and living as nature. That means we're going back to the old paganism. Nature is God, we have to live in harmony with nature. But when we put on the stove to get it warm here, we do not live in harmony with nature. When nature is cold, we have to have it cold. Well, culture will diminish. And Return of the Gods, very good book. The old religions from the pagans, you see it returning in new development goals. Et voila, the divine punishment as an ancient tool for modern sustainability. When the people are scared, you can manipulate them. And that's what the priests in the former times already knew, and now our government does it again. Well, to boil it all down, trust in the Lord, use your brain. You know the books from Jan McGilchrist? Very, very splendid books from how your brain is, the architecture of your brain, and how it works. Well, you can couple the questions on it. Where do you come from? What are you doing here? And where are you going? Well, who has the best story to answer that questions?
I think they want to decide all those questions for you now, don't they? That's really...
Well, that's my short story. Now we go to the story from Lo. Just a minute.
Ja? Haaien.
Ah, dat is heel big.
Well, Lo is the spokesman for the IJsselmeer fishermen, and he will explain how they are working with the government. Not against. Try to work with the government.
To continue on Jan Rein's story, he already said a few things about sustainable development goals and their implementation in society. Well, I want to go a little bit more in depth, because what we'll see is the implementations of these planetary boundaries. And to name a few, there are 9 we have to deal with. So that comes from living in nature, living as nature. So we have climate change to deal with, biosphere integrity, land system change, freshwater use, biochemical flows, ocean acidifications, and atmospheric aerosols, the ARIES model we have here in all our countries, the stratospheric ozone, and novel entities. So all unmeasurable indexes that can never sustain any type of model to make policy with. Well, how impacted that the IJsselmeer? To begin, the impact on the IJsselmeer fishing rights are 95% right reduction. So from 1963 onwards, here you see 85 on the sheet above, but it's actually 95. So we have a 95 fleet reduction. Well, that's unprecedented in 95%? Any. Yes, 95 right reduction. So that's that translates to fleet reduction and fishing rights reduction.
So 95%
95%.
less fish.
Less capacity to fish.
Fishing
Yeah.
In the form of nets.
Yeah. And we see it in 2 types of reduction. That is fleet reduction, because people will not fish with that low amount of nets. It's not profitable.
Even een inbreuk.
Ja.
Die 95% is vanaf
1963.
nee, dat het vastgelegd is de net. Want daarvoor was er nog veel meer wisselen. Want je moet eigenlijk bij 32 beginnen. Toen mocht de gemotoriseerde vloot moest naar buiten. En voor de zeilen mocht je binnen blijven. Met afsluiting van de afsluiting. Maar sinds dat er de netten geregistreerd werden in de aantallen, vanaf die tijd dus, dat is eigenlijk veel meer nog als vanaf 1932.
Okay, so what my father said is since the beginning of the enclosure of the IJsselmeer, so when the afsluitdijk was built to separate fresh water from salt water. It's one of the biggest projects in the 1930s, and it enclosed the IJsselmeer and made it fresh water. Then there was a separation of the fleet, and that fleet with the sails, because there weren't many motorized ships back then, especially not for company like small companies like fishing companies. Only for war ships and that kind of stuff, and big cargo ships. So the motorized ships went abroad, or went on the North Sea, and the sail ships that were driven by sails, they were allowed to stay inside. And from there on, we had a much bigger fleet. And the fleet was already decimated from 1932 to 1963, where the General Fisheries Act was introduced. So I'm counting the 95 reduction from 1963, but from 1932 to 1963 there was already a great reduction of the fleet. So it may be more than 95. So there is no any other sector I know of that got such a great reduction in capacity.
Ondertussen groeit de Noordzeevloot.
Ja.
Dat klopt toch allemaal.
Ja, we gaan dat wel over, because we know we are at the parallel evolution. We got a few facts to start, and the third fact is the Wadden impact. It's a small part where the shrimp fleet is catching their shrimps. It got decimated by almost 70,000 hectares. That's just a by-fact. Now, and of course, some of these facts you know. I mean, the Club of Rome, the Brundtland Report, planetary boundaries, and I've tried to line them up with what happened in the Fisheries Acts and the fishery policies. Well, as Jan Rein said in the beginning, that when the Club of Rome was still meeting with the important people of the earth and setting the boundaries with their World 3 model, the fishery on the North Sea and IJsselmeer was still in the booming phase. Like Jan Rein told us now in the 1970s, it was go catch as much fish as you can, because we need, we takes the loot, so we need as much fish as possible to get to get the food, a great food production for the Netherlands.
You mean there were battles between countries who gets the most fish? Or?
I don't know exactly why they did it. I think it goes in line with freedmen, like profit maximizations. It also came on the fleet, came on the fishery
It was a
fleet.
kind of a power race between each other.
But
So this
who's
not-
each other, the fishermen or the
Yeah.
countries?
Yeah, I know the fishermen.
Okay.
It's not especially from country to country, but inside there was also a war going on. Who got the biggest ships? Who got the most power?
But that is the social, psychological effect for
Yeah.
Englishmen. But our country, of every country had just after World War II its own battle to maximize profit. The brutto national product from the Netherlands was zero just in 1945 after World War II. So they boosted agriculture and the fishery
Get it back up.
to create export for the brutal national product.
We still had rationing in England until about 1953.
Yeah,
You know, longer than anybody.
yeah.
Well, going onwards to the Brundtland and Rio report, you see they're already setting their goals for sustainable development, and then you can see the start of the shift in regulations. So when you see the sustainable development, you see the institutionalization of science, then you see the start of the technical phase, and then is when the quota revolution became. So they started to set limits on what you can catch. Before that, there was also a quota, but that was systematically kept higher than what was catched. You just to have it in somewhere in a policy, but it was never applied.
Yeah.
But then at the end of 1970s, so it started 98, then you get the start of the quota. Well, what did it bring? Again, a shift. The people with the money, they bought the quota, and you got a power concentration. And nowadays they might want that, because now they want a power concentration for companies. But back then they didn't want it, so they waited. There was a big power concentration. The big monies were all concentrated. Then they took off the quota and they got on with another model, the MSI model, and that's the model that is still in place now. And you can see it in the planetary boundaries. The science and the scientists are making the models to give an idea of what was in the sea and what could be catched. And that's to us it's an unsustainable way of making policy, because you never know what's under the water, and you can never know what the fishermen are going to catch. And now I'm going to jump back to the IJsselmeer. When you see that the legislation and the policy was introduced in the European policy, then you see that the member states, they take over from the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals, they take it over. Every member state makes their own implementation goals. So and we see that the Netherlands was very tight on taking over the European policies. Because if you have, for example, the Aries model that measures nitrogen on the farms,
Yes.
in Germany it's way the boundary is way higher than in Netherlands, and you also saw it with the fisheries. I mean they put on above our head an MSI model that didn't even work for a freshwater lake, but they tried it because they knew. From history based on the MSI model was made to reduce fishery, not to make an ecological sustainable. That was not the goal. If you see the history of the MSI model was made back when the Japanese fleet was trying to fish on cod in Alaskan waters. They introduced the model which was just a theoretical model. They introduced this as policy. So they said to the Japanese fleet, you cannot come here in Alaska, and we have this model right here, it's scientifically based, and you cannot catch more cod here because the system is now at its maximum sustainable yield. And that is some kind of tightening policy to get other fishermen out of your waters. But what they did, they used it as a policy everywhere. So what you see the effect where MSI is implemented, you see a reduction in fleet. It's a logical outcome of the MSI model. And that's why they want to use it, I think. Because if you, it's good for big companies. They have foreknowledge. They know what will happen. They can buy rights. They can use their money to get a heads-on the system. And small companies, they don't have the knowledge. They don't have the experience to calculate or be in the same room with those climate clubs, and they get bashed, basically. And that's what happened on IJsselmeer when the MSI model was anchored in the European policy in the Netherlands. A year later, we saw our 85 rights reduction. So this is after all those reductions we already had in 1963. We had a 32%, we had a 60% reduction. We had a closure of some kind of fishing gears. There are lots of limits. We will see that later on. And on top of that, we got an 85% reduction. Well, and now we're in the last phase, which you can see the ecological phase. Now, for everything, every action you will do in a Natura 2000 area, you have the burden of proof that you cannot harm any species that they that they have located and have put on a list that you cannot harm. So the burden of proof has exponentially shifted towards the user of the area they chose. There's een volgende.
Interrupt. Voor deze. Ieder effect als je maar in knop was aan draaien kunnen.
Ja,
ongeacht of hij schuldig is of niet. Dat is belangrijk.
Yeah, that's a logical conclusion. If you use the MSI model, there is only one button you can turn on. That's fishery. So and they have a name for it. That is fishing mortality. They have a system where they put fishing mortality, natural mortality, and climate shift. They put in a model, and the only thing that they can steer in and steer on is fishing mortality. So that's fishing pressure. They turn it down and you lose your rights.
En de wetgeving is zo inricht dat al onze posities weer ben.
Hoe bedoel je?
Nou, eigenlijk geen enkele positie, maar we mogen alles van het natuurgenieuw bewezen.
Yeah, that's the burden of proof story.
The
Yes.
burden of proof is it comes from England.
Well, it's almost impossible to prove that you don't have an effect on
Yeah.
something. I mean, it's basically impossible.
Yeah, and the people's impact is always the biggest. So if you have no position
Well,
to
you
talk.
are basically the problem, aren't you?
Yeah. Always.
Well, and where did it come from? It comes from the Brundtland and Rio report. It's a precautionary principle. So
Err on the side of caution.
yeah, with that principle they shifted.
Unless, of course, it's an experimental vaccine, in which case it's...
Then it's a different. Yeah. So that's the shift in the 1990s when with the Rio in 1992. They set it in. They anchor it in the policy of European law. The precautionary principle shifted the burden of proof from the government, saying that they had to prove fishery was bad. Now you have to prove fishery is not bad. So
is that the reason that the fishermen in the North Sea or the Baltic have to bring back all the fish?
That's just a side effect of this precautionary principle. Because you have to prove that the small fish you catch, that they do not die. But if you take them to shore, then they give a good measurement on how much you catch, and then they can cut you off on those species, because they call it limiting species. So if your main goal is catching plaice, and you catch a few cods, and they see that, then they extrapolate that data, and then if you, for example, with 1,000 kilo plaice, you catch 5 kilo cod, they extrapolate that and they calculate it to annual. and then you get maybe 500 kilo cods, and then they can put in that model, and then they can restrict the place fishery based on the limiting species to cod. And just a side effect of that is when the climate shifted a little bit warmer the past 30 years, cod is going to the north. You can see less cod. The restrictions on cod get more and more tight because there is less cod, and then you can catch less cod as a bycatch, and then you get more restriction on place. Yeah. So it's a side effect, and it helps themselves to regulate even more.
Yeah.
The self-closing system.
Yeah.
You have to move.
And is everybody who's fishing in the North Sea, are they all under the same rules, or?
Yeah, there are some small difference between if you fish under a German flag, but I have no knowledge of that. So maybe other people can, because I don't have any knowledge about what.
At the moment,
Are there lesser restrictions on very small boats where people? I think there used to be in England certainly, and I don't live near the sea, and my area has never been near the sea, but there used to be less restrictions on people who had very small boats.
Yeah, but they have different nets.
Yeah, and
kind
different
of,
places to fish on.
Yeah.
And the only difference between member states is quota or mesh size to fish with on the North Sea. So there's a little bit different, but the quota is the biggest problem, and the bycatch.
Well, in short, you can see it on screen the causal chain. So you have a macro system. So they make the policy, they make the law, and then you get to like Aries model, Natura 2000, bird habitat, food reservation for birds take precedence on fishery. Well, what you see next is MSI policy only controls fishing effort. It ignores that warming forces cold water species north. So what I told about cod. Well, then what they do next is science is commissioned, and then you all know this type of stuff. Also with Corona, that science is commissioned. It's not like the science is somewhere made out of political context. It's made within political context, and then you get political ideological goals. Advice becomes binding law. That's a very poisonous way of making policy. They commission science. They feed and pay the science. They make the goal. The science somehow reaches that goal one way or another, and then the policy is backed by science. You cannot control that phase because it's done out of your reach on climate tables, on that, and on any kind of tables you are not part of if you are a small fisherman or even a big fisherman. Maybe if you are a very big company like Palafit van der Plas, maybe you know them. Maybe you can tell.
It's near where I live. They live in Katwijk, and that's a very, very big company.
Yeah, like
It's a worldwide
billions.
They can pay expensive non-governmental organizations,
Yeah.
lobby groups.
Yes, so they'll be at the meetings where the regulations
Yeah.
are made.
Together with the
Small-
government.
Small man has no lobby group.
Well, you've probably got the same as in England. We've got the best politicians money can buy.
Yeah, in short, that's the. Right, it's the same like control the food, control the people, right? If you control a few big companies that catch all the fish, same with on farms. If you see it in the United States a lot, that even a billion company is now a small player.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, but there was a big bison farmer, or maybe I don't know. Maybe there's different naming for it, but he was always the bully of the small farmers. And lately, I think this year he made a documentary that he complained about the big companies also abroad buying out his rights, while he was doing the same all the time with the very small farmers.
Yeah.
But no. Just for visual representation, very easy science phase anatomy. Pressure matrix, it's an important one. If you see the pre-1990, the only things they were measuring was stock biomass, and fuel cost was a problem of the fleet. So water quality was not a concern because there were no planetary boundaries melted into the policies. No Nature 2000, no space for wind and shipping, and no nitrogen rules. But now you see that the pressure matrix is literally on every side of their company.
And how to read the left one, like the squeeze?
Yeah.
How do you measure fishery autonomy? By the amount of companies? Or?
No, the fishery autonomy was like we catch this, and this is a sustainable catch based on what the data we deliver. So we catch a certain amount of fish. That's what's inside the water, and we predict somewhat amount that tons of fish for next year. Okay. So outside of a model.
So empirical.
Yeah. Yes, empirical data. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here you see a little bit more in detail what happened on IJsselmeer. I took out a few important ones because I had a list of like 30. I couldn't put them in a staff diagram, how do you call it? So you got the 1932 enclosure, and you got the Sunday ban. Well, that's not a bad thing for Christians, but it is a ban which can be translated into a rest period. So it can be counted, maybe not for us personally, but it is counted as a time where the fish cannot be caught. Mm-hmm. It's only on the freshwater, so be mindful. Weekend ban.
Voor de garn, hè?
Mm-hmm.
Ja, ja, ze zal nog wel even vertellen.
Fishery,
yeah. Shrimp fishery.
No, this is eel.
Oh, this is
eel and pike perch. It's on the freshwater. It's the lake you see here.
Yeah.
So you got the Sunday ban. Later on, you got a weekend ban. You got certain waters got closed. 2003, you see a net limit. So there is a net limit per right. So you had one fishing right got 50 nets, for example, and with geo nets. So they stand in the water, they are passive, and you got 50 passive nets per one fishing right. Later on, you got a net regulation, so you have to report everything you do. Then you in 2009, you got the first Natura 2000 areas are located everywhere in the Netherlands with their policies and their restrictions. And then 2014, you see the last big rights cut, 85%. And even in 2024, they still try to sanitate the last few fishing rights, which were like 20 or 30 or something on the whole IJsselmeer.
It seems like if you want to be a fisherman, you have to do a master's in maths first.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, yeah.
Nowadays.
One of the aspects.
Of have a great one.
Just one.
Well, this is for Wilma, de shrimp clamp. Hey, wil je deze gebruiken, Wilma? Kun je het misschien wat beter zelf
The
lezen.
microphone.
Okay, I will explain first what happened in shrimp fishery. Shrimp fishery was, in the old days, it was just shrimp fishing. There was no quota because shrimps are like the wheat of the sea. So if there are not many, then there will be many a couple of months later because the male goes into female and otherwise. So they change sex and then the production is bigger.
Gender neutral.
Gender neutral.
It's the shrimp's fault.
I was waiting for it.
And how long does that take?
Up until there's enough. Hoe noem je dat?
Females?
Yeah, enough shrimps again.
Can they change back, or is it a one-way?
That they didn't find out, I think. But there's a period. There was in 2013. There was a period there were so little shrimps, and then a couple of months later it was like booming.
Yeah.
So they can change and they can product with the eggs and reproduce with the eggs, and they've got many eggs or not that many eggs in certain periods, because if there are many, they don't bring up many eggs. Something like that.
And is that related then to the amount of food for the shrimps?
Yeah, the shrimps are food for the fish.
Ecological.
It's an ecological. Yeah,
regulation.
it's.
Yeah, but I mean, if there's little food, that's what you mean for the shrimp.
Now, if there are little, yeah, if there are not many shrimps because they were eaten or something,
they become
Because you've
females,
got
do 4
cod
eggs.
and hoe noem je de whiting? Ik weet niet wat
Yeah,
whiting is.
whiting. It's
Whiting
the same as in
is
a.
hetzelfde.
Yeah.
They eat a lot of shrimps, when they come up to the coast, they eat them, and then they're scared, so they go away, and then they product again, and then they come back again. So you never know what you catch. So that's why there was no quota for shrimps. In 2013, they came together from the government, and they wanted to do the nature safety rule, and they want the ships to. They wanted a gouvernant. Ja, dat is hetzelfde, denk ik.
Yeah, but they want to rule a bit.
A
Ruling.
ruling. And on the beginning of October 2014, they find everyone agreeable about that. But before that, they did also the closed weekends.
Yeah.
Because that was because of the tongue, the sole and the place fishery, that they can go for more fish. And then the shrimp fishery was only in Holland from Sunday night 12 o'clock to Friday in the afternoon. And they banned the weekends for fishing. That was before that. But then in October of 2014, they found everyone agreeable on, and also the NGO's, agreeable on doing the NB-wet, the Natuurbeschermingswet.
Yeah, nature
Yeah,
protection.
nature protection law. And in that government, they wanted to reduce the ships by 20 to 30% up until 2026. And they wanted to close a lot of area. So they closed about 5,000 hectares so, of the Waddenzee.
Yeah.
And then there came the Natura 2000 agreement.
You're familiar with the Natura 2000?
No.
And they
Oh,
don't
that's
use it in
the for the birds and the fish and
The
the
designated
very
areas that-
very
British. Dutch innovation.
Nature
It's-
preservation area.
Yeah.
So, for example, when the farmers live near that area, they're greatly restricted in pesticide use. And
Mhm.
whatever.
And the carbon deposit
yeah.
and so on.
So they did that, and then in between there were ships stopping and things like that. But at the end we had about 226 ships left from the 240 in 2013.
Say that, how many left?
228, I think about 224, 28. And then they came about 3 years ago, and in that covenant, with the Natura 2000, they closed again about 8,000 hectares. And that was an agreement, and that was for the birds and the feed and the food for the birds and things like that. We had to agree with that, but because otherwise we couldn't get the NB-wet vergunning, and you need the NB-wet vergunning to fish in the Waddenzee.
It's like a permit, like a
Yeah.
nature law
Mhm.
permit.
So more reduction to keep the same permit. Every time there was a covenant, there was a meeting, they had to reduce more rights to keep the permit. And you see that the
Yeah.
more hectares every
And
time.
if you break the rules, you lose your permit.
Yeah.
And you get
Yeah,
fined.
and every new year we have to again to ask for the permit, and you have to fulfill their needs. Otherwise, you don't get a permit at all.
Every year.
Yeah, every year. So
Yeah,
it's
that
a
was in the beginning.
it's a constant
And now
pleasure.
you get every year you get a new permit, and they agree the agreement for about 5 years or something. And in 2015, there were a lot of ships wanted to stop. About 19, I think, stopped at the end. And that was also because the NGOs wanted to close more and wanted to have more, and they had special birds that need protection. You can't fish there, you can't fish there. And they stopped because they were normally old or fed up with all the rules.
Regulation
Tired.
fatigue.
And now, this last year, we had also a buyout procedure, and that was from the European Union. And now about 62 ships are stopping. They are agreed for, so they are gone. And up until February this year, you can apply again. It's closed in February, that application. And I think there are going to be 10 more that wanted to stop. So that's 33% of the fishing fleet left before. That's stopping.
But will the quota get shared out amongst the fewer people and
No,
they
and
get more quota?
they still want more.
Yeah.
They still want
One
more
factory.
land, and we want to close down areas, and we've got the katalysator.
Yeah, it's a scrubber system that cleans your exhaust system. So your exhaust gases get cleaned. It's a very expensive system. So all these boats, they forced to
All that
to
are
put on.
left
Yeah.
need that system on their boat.
€100,000,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, 100,000.
Well, 100,000 euros is the total price, and you get from the government 50. So you have to pay 50 for something you don't need.
Yeah.
So it's
But what
it's
do these boats that stop, what is the offer they're getting, or what is the deal?
the deal depends on how big the ship is, how many tonnage.
The weight.
Yeah, the weight, and if they've got a license. This buyout is with only because of the license and the days they have fished in the Waddenzee.
Yeah, track
And,
records.
So they need to show how many days they fished, and depending on the fishing and the tonnage from the ship and the license, they get the buyout.
So they get money.
Yeah.
But they have to hand in their ship.
Yeah.
Which is
Oh.
which is going to be ruined.
Yeah.
And never to be used.
No,
And
and
their
the
rights.
license is
That's
gone.
the most important thing is that they're also losing their license.
And they can't sell
That is
that
totally
separately.
destroyed and it will never come back.
No, that's gone. So the only thing that's left now is, I think, about 130, 120 ships. And
Isn't there an enormous pressure on those ships that want to leave from the
No.
other fishers? To
no,
say,
no, no, no. If they want to leave, they want to leave. And if they get money, that's fine. But don't punish us again with getting more areas of land again and nature things.
So,
and
so if another 100 said that we want to leave,
Mhm.
the remaining 40 wouldn't get any more quota, you
No.
don't think?
It's all
You
reduced.
get the impression they don't really want you to go fishing.
Yes, the NGOs want us off the Waddenzee.
Well, the NGOs are the excuse.
No,
Yeah,
no, no,
yeah.
no, no, not only.
The system is like this, and she means it too, that the NGOs are used by the government to give a moral superior
They're
look.
the stick to beat you with.
Yeah.
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 They do the science, and they together with the governments they make the science, and then
And then it's not the government doing it to you
Yeah.
as well.
Well, it's also the government doing that.
yeah, we know that.
We
but-
get.
Yeah, you cannot point a finger to the
No,
government.
but now it's like we get a license for 20 years with the agreement that every 5 years the government can look into it and change things. Not the fishery, you can't say anything, and not even reply on it or get
So they don't have,
lawsuits.
you don't have consultation with the fishermen.
No.
You're told, this is it, take it or leave it.
It's a one-way wind.
Yeah, but we've got the 20 years.
Okay. So
License.
over all this time we've been
Mhm.
talking about sort of since the 1930s, what's the sort of weight of catch compared to the 1930s that's coming ashore now here? Or being taken off these waters by your boats? Is anybody else taking the shrimp or the fish? Are you
well,
having to share it with other nations?
yeah, Germany, Belgium, but they can only fish outside of the
limit.
Waddenzee.
Yes.
Yeah, outside of the 3 miles. And Belgium can fish on the 3 miles from the coast, but not in the Waddenzee. That's a different license. So yeah, they can fish here too.
Why is it that the people who are tired, who actually want to fish, but they're tired of all these rules, why don't they go? I read of some fishermen going to Norway, for example, where he's happily catching.
No, that's the same.
Yeah.
It's
same
all the
story.
same.
It's under the
It's
EU
all the
rules,
same.
aren't it?
Is it? I thought
Yeah,
the French
Denmark
fishermen
and-
were more
Well,
free.
the laws trickle down from, it's the same trickle down effect as with money printing. The laws trickle down from from the United Nations into the member states of European Union, and then all those member states, they give their own policy based on those laws. So you cannot flee to another European country.
But I
because-
thought you said the Dutch government is particularly
Yeah,
tight on.
they are particularly tight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why, I don't know.
And they want to be the best boy in class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what they
But
say.
that's what I mean. So there must be countries where it's a little bit better.
Yeah, but
It's better there, but when you go with your ship to Germany, you have to apply there, you have to get the license there, you have to live there perfectly, and or have a mailadres of een postbus.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very complex process.
Yeah,
to settle
it's
in different
very
countries, of course.
complex.
Yeah.
There are
And what
fishermen
about-
doing that.
And what about a country like Albania, which is not EU, but it's on the sea?
Well,
Now, in case of the
It's-
shrimp fishery, it's
only
a
here.
a quite local
Yeah.
fish to catch. There are only shrimps on the Belgian coast, the Dutch coast, and
German and Denmark.
German and Denmark. To the half of
And
Denmark.
a little bit of England. The bottom part of England
Yeah.
is also the
It's a local fishery, so you can't
Confirm.
flee to another country and go shrimp there.
Yeah.
It's not that
But
easy.
My worry is what I wrote to you is the expertise is also going.
It's all
Yeah,
lost.
yeah.
And that is a loss to the whole world.
Yeah.
if the
Yeah.
expertise is growing. Yeah. So is there not any way to catch that?
No,
at least?
but we don't need that expertise anymore. We have now big salmon farmers in Norway, in Peru, in Scotland, in.
But it's not
Yeah, full of parasites.
yeah.
Exactly,
And
but
full of having to vaccinate them because they're full of disease.
yes, but Greenpeace.
I wouldn't eat any of that stuff.
Greenpeace and all that kind of organizations keep quiet with a lot of money. Because the biotope, ecological zone from Norway, is totally spoiled by the antibiotics from the salmon farmers.
Yeah.
But the nature organizations don't hear them because they earn a lot of money from the salmon farmers.
You're not suggesting that vested interests may have influenced their decisions, are you?
It seems like it.
But is that measurable? That the in the sea? That,
Yes, zeker.
yeah.
So, obviously, where do you sell your fish and your shrimp?
The shrimp is
Locally, or is it international?
No.
Local auction.
You have to put
Is it
them on
going into a
in
world
auction.
market or?
No.
No.
It's a big company in 2 big companies in Holland, and there's a couple of small ones, and you have to put them into the auction to be sifted, separated from the small ones. You have to do the measurements on the shrimps. There are 3 measurements points, so you have A, B, C. And then you sell them, and that's up to you. And with the MSA label,
Marine Steward Council.
and we had
Is that like in England we'd have on the farms the red tractor mark?
no,
On your produce, you have to, on the bag, you can put the red tractor. That
No, I
makes it
think so, yeah.
environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's
Sustained
been a lot
fishing.
lately.
sustained
Yeah,
fishery.
it's a labeling market.
Yes.
It doesn't mean anything, but in Holland, the label is used by the organization, fishery organization. We are not in there. We are separate from the organizations.
So if people are eating the same amount of shrimps and you're not catching them, where are the shrimps coming from then to make up the gap, or people just not eating as much seafood?
The price
anymore?
goes up.
The
The
price,
goes up.
Yeah.
Consumption goes down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, consumption shifts from good quality nature catched foods to processed foods, and that's control the food, control the people.
Mhm.
So these legislations serve a certain goal that can be tracked down towards the problem.
So what
you
you're
were
telling me is
saying.
that of the fresh fish out of the North Sea and the IJsselmeer, there's less of it going into human consumption every year.
There are less ships.
And let's catch.
And they try to replace
So
it
it's
with.
basically more frozen pizza.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they try to replace it with products from abroad, like the salmon in Norway.
Or soya with
Yeah,
fish,
soybeans.
flavor. What kind of flavor do
Yeah,
you
but I
want?
mean, like we're seeing in France, that the farmers are kicking off over there about a deal to buy beef from South America, which is not to the same standards that the farmers in Europe would have to, and obviously they're going to be undercut, and even with the transport costs. I mean, are you under the same situation with other fisheries products? And where are they coming from?
Niet helemaal hoor.
tilapia.
Ik weet wat hij bedoelt, maar it's not exactly that story. Because when you are a potato farmer here in Holland, and you can say, well, I want that price for my potatoes. There is one farmer over in Eastern Europe, from Ukraine.
He'll take less.
Yeah, he'd take less.
Yeah,
And
I was a potato merchant for 22 years. I used to handle 5% of all the fresh potatoes in the UK.
Yeah, then you know the story. The market
I
is
know how to work
flooded
farmers, yes.
with cheaper potatoes.
Yes.
But that's not a fact in the fishery. Not 100%. Because they try to replace some of the fresh North Sea fish with tilapia from Asia.
Yes.
Or black tiger shrimps
Yes.
from... waar komen die vandaan
Ja,
eigenlijk?
overal.
Ja,
Azië.
the big filthy things
Yeah.
full of parasites. But it doesn't work that good.
Well,
Because...
So actually what you're seeing is there's just consumption of produce from the sea is just going down in Europe.
Yeah.
it is going down, and
And that's because of the regulations and not because of the biomass. Because, for example, in the IJsselmeer, where Lau just talked about, the catch per net goes up and up and up for like 9 years already. It's exploded. But it doesn't matter if you take every time you take regulation from the
So
government.
to catch your quota, you're going out much less times because you're getting more fish.
It was a little bit different.
You have a lot less gear to use. So you use less gear, but catch the same amount.
Less nets.
And that's because the government want to control everything, but cannot. Because we believe in a higher entity who's caring for us, and that's also that we are continuing our fight. Is that we believe in a higher entity who's caring for us. Because when all the levers, also in the shrimp fishery, they get a sort of regulation fatigue.
that's the higher picture.
Yeah, and when
The bigger picture.
when you have nothing to rely on, you get tired of everything.
But they have a very local market, and the IJsselmeer, very special fish. But the fish from the North Sea is certainly replaced by cheaper kinds from Chinese trawlers fishing all over the world. And the Chinese trawlers have Uyghurs slave on the trawlers. Very cheap.
Is that so? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
The Uyghurs.
You know the
Yeah.
Outlaw Ocean. Look at that. It's a group of research journalists. 5 years ago, they were in fast rubber boats following the Chinese trawlers. We start with old-fashioned flesjepost.
Like the
Message in a bottle.
Message in a bottle, yeah. And they write about that world on the trawlers from the Chinese. and the merchandise world behind it. And also other factories buy that fish. So at first, the journalist wrote to the factories here on Urk, hey, do you know you buy fish that's processed by slaves? No reaction. Then they published it and it became world news. And then came the most beautiful anti-slavery statements from the factories here.
Yeah,
So you know what it is, but how does it work on the selling business here? A young seller, fish
How
seller.
do they do the traceability of where that fish actually came from if it's coming off a Chinese factory ship?
It's all that label market. If you have the just stamp on it, nobody looks at it. Ken je het boek van Jeroen Siebelink?
Nee.
Dat is het bedwelmingsapparaat over the meat factory here in Holland. Anyway, there is no capacity to control. Nobody is going to enter a Chinese trawler
And start looking through the catch.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that pressure is there on the markets for cheap fish, and it's all frozen on board and comes in containers here on Urk.
Kijk jij nou over de visserijindustrie op werk, hè? Kijk, daar zijn wel twee, there are two separate things. There's the fish processing industry. They get a lot of influx from fish abroad.
Yeah.
But where we talk about like shrimps, IJsselmeer the pipe perch, and we are also fishing on the North Sea on soles, like Dover sole. That kind of markets are really local. So we don't get any problems with pricing or so, and that's also.
Well, Dover sole in a restaurant in London, central London, 40 to 50 euros.
Yeah, because that is not replaceable with cheap Asian.
Dover sole.
Ja. Ik wil even dit opmerken ertussen nu. Ja, ik vier keer aan voor Hollywood in het snowboarden, er zullen misschien nog wel een paar geweest. Maar zijn natuurlijk een IJsselmeer geweest, dat is nog geen vervangende kweekvis.
Nee, maar dat zeg ik ook natuurlijk.
rendabel.
Maar een tong ook niet.
Was niet rendabel.
Nee. En een Nederlandse garnaal, die is ook niet te vervangen. Dat werkt niet.
Yeah, they tried to replace pike perch with aquaculture-based pike perch, but it didn't work because they eat each other.
So what's the difference between a pike perch and a zander?
Yeah, it's the
It's the
same.
same.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pike is
yeah.
the English name. Sander is a German-based name.
Wel maar, you fish.
And what about, can you explain to me, obviously the net sizes, how does that work? And isn't that how you make sure you're not catching the wrong size small fish?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, it's the mesh size.
The net
Yeah.
mesh size
It's
on the net.
also regulated.
Yes.
regulated.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they don't take that into account when they are calculating bycatch. So they are not saying, oh, you have a certain mesh size, so we are not going to regulate you on small bycatch. They don't do that. On IJsselmeer, they certainly don't. They just they assume you have bycatch of a certain sort of fish. Only the very small ones they give you a green pass on. But the model counts and calculates with
I mean, you're fishermen, you want there to be plenty of fish, otherwise you want it to be sustainable, otherwise you're finished, aren't you?
Yeah, and also my
Catch all
little,
the fish.
little boy.
Exactly.
I want to go in fish too. So that's the whole point of the story. They make the public think that we are destroying ourselves. Because, but why we should?
Exactly.
Perhaps we can go now to the most important thing of this afternoon, the way out, the strategy.
Yeah, because what do you think, Andrew, is the right strategy in England? What do you see developing in the UK?
On the fishing side, well, we've decimated our fishing fleets in the UK. All those rules were made when Britain wasn't at the table, and our fish were seen as a shared. Yeah, you know, they wanted our North Sea oil as well. They said that should be shared as well. Yeah, and the traitors we had in charge nearly gave us that. Well, now, I mean, our fish is just going to be given away as we haven't got the fleet to to use our own fish anyway, and it will be given away by Mr. Starmer for whatever Ursula von der Leyen wants. Just like we've now given away that Ursula von der Leyen will instigate conscription in the UK, even though we left the European Union, because we have joined the European Defence and Securities Union, but we left. Yeah.
Yeah, but you see, the European Union started as a trade union, only based
Well,
on
who wouldn't be
common
against?
markets.
And who wouldn't be against that? Everyone wanted a common market.
Nobody's against that. It's a smart move, especially if you're up against BRICS countries or maybe the United States.
Absolutely.
It's a good buffer, but they just pulled the money issue in about every policy they made, because it was a trade union. They just implemented money in any kind of policy so that they could work from a money-based
But I think
policy.
I think the science, as we talked about, is coming back. Did you see what Robert Kennedy issued in America? The guidance for nutrition again now, and that will filter through. That people should be eating proper meat, proper fish, full fat dairy, saturated fats, and that is going to. They're going to want the fish, and we want it sustainable. You want it sustainable, but I mean, there's a whole industry of there must be more bureaucrats in the EU working on fish than there is fishermen now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
More regulators than how many regulators each will you have? You know, you'll have a lot of regulators, won't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't count it, but probably more than fishermen.
Well, I mean, they are all empire builders. That's how bureaucrats work. So they want more regulations, and they need more regulators. I mean, it's an empire.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, your business is, we catch the fish, we sell the fish. We've got to sell more fish than last year. More money's worth of fish to pay all the bills because the bills have gone up. That you've got to maximise your outputs and minimise your inputs. Well, if you're in government, the success is measured by maximising the inputs, because that's a budget. You know, success in government is I've got a €5 million budget this year, and next year I want a 10 million. Not about what you put out. It's only measured on how many people in my pyramid, and we all move up and get a bigger pension.
My salary.
My salary goes up because I got another layer coming in here. Yeah, that's success. It's not success about what we deliver. That's the difference between the public sector and the private sector.
And you see that all,
you don't catch any fish, you're out of business.
It seems like when structures are becoming too big, they're not controllable anymore, and then the regulators within the system are getting a word on their own.
Well, also the regulators are moving further away from the fishermen, because now it's at EU level, which is further than if you were going to the local council or your own parliament, and they were making decisions about the sustainability of Dutch fishing grounds.
Well, they made it that complex on purpose, I think. If you now need a master.
I think the public demand. People are going to see what they've been eating over and why health has generally declined, especially in America, and the processed foods. And I think there's going to be a demand that people will be more with the farmers and the fishermen wanting unprocessed foods and wanting access to it. And that is going to be a massive pressure across the developed world as people become a little bit more informed about what they should be eating, what they shouldn't be eating.
Well, there is the crux. When people get more informed.
Well, the media's not on your side.
Indeed, and as long
there's never any good stories about fishermen, is there? There's no good stories about business people, is there? You know,
as long as the supermarket and Netflix in the evening keeps delivering, your neighbor is not interested that you're struggling for life.
About these fishermen that are going to stop with the shrimp fishermen, but are not retiring, what are they going to do?
Live off the money in the first couple of years, I think, because you can't invest in fishery with that money. So you get the money and you get like 600,000 or 800,000, and you can't invest in fishery again.
And you're saying
that's a
and you're saying that it doesn't matter how many people go out, and it won't affect what the quota is. What if nobody goes out? The quota will just all go down for everybody more.
Also goes down. But now it also goes down.
Even though people have left, it's still going down.
That's because it's a model-based policy. and not empirical data based policy. That's the same as
Perhaps you can explain what you were trying to do now.
Yeah, well, the way out. Well, the synthesis, or how do you pronounce that? I don't know, but
Synthesis, yeah.
synthesis, yeah. Now you see clearly that now we're living off a paper reality. So they feed their model with data they measure themselves. On that way, the government asks the scientists for policy, and they have a precautionary principle, as we spoke about, and the restrictions come to the fishermen. Well, what's our model? What we want to do? We want to read ourselves into the information. Then we want to increase our knowledge about these networks and about the policies that are starting in the United Nations. So a good handle is the Sustainable Development Goals. You have certain policies laid out there that you can use and fill out on your own and make a good pitch by the government, portraying yourself as a responsible new age fisherman. Like we know where your policy is coming from. We know who makes it and why.
Surely you have to be a fisher person.
Yeah, maybe, probably yes. That's part of the social construct within.
The head of a fire station in the UK, and he got sacked for saying fireman too often. Seriously.
Well, anyway.
You have to say fire person enough, whatever that is.
Anyway, be a fisherman and read into the information of the government. Know where the policy is coming from, and fill out your own model, and fill out your own strategy to regulate your own seas. And is it possible? Yes, because now what we said about what Wilma also said and what Jamila said, the people are more read in nowadays. We have AI, so people can read European policies more easier than before, because you run it through an AI model and it gets an explanation without reading the full document with all these very complex texts. And set out our own NGO, and me and Wilma and other people are working on that, creating an NGO of ourselves, educating the people on common facts, just like other people have done in different industries before us. Because the problem is there is room for filling in your own policy and your own regulations. Why is there room? Because due to these European policies, you get a paradox in some places. And with a paradox, I mean, for example, with on the IJsselmeer, we have kaderrichtlijn water. So it's a policy to make cleaner and better water. And what do you get with cleaner and better water in a freshwater lake? The predators who predate on site, they get an advantage. So you get a shift in biomass from predators. They go up, and bentivores go down. What does that give us? It gives us an imbalance in biomass, so you get more predators, less bentivores, you get too clean of water. So their own policy backs up their other policy, and you got a double clam, a double clam on the fishery policies. So what can we say? Our plan is we need a predator strategy. So we need to focus on taking out more predators, and luckily for us, those are the best market fish. They have the best price.
What are they, for example?
The pike perch, the sanders. So the sanders are the main predator of the IJsselmeer. Yeah. So they're the one policy they make backs up their other policy. So we have cleaner water, but now they see the total biomass is going down, but the predator biomass is going up, relative.
Yes.
So they get their own world. They made their own world of clean water, and we get punished. We get punished on their own clean water.
Well, I think you've got a special case for the IJsselmeer. It's a closed area.
Yeah.
It's not open to. There's nobody from another nation coming and fishing that. it's completely in your interest to make it sustainable, otherwise there's no future. And really, they should be listening to the fishermen, whose interest it is to A, make a living, and B, keep it sustainable.
Yeah, and that's why
not many bureaucrats want to put themselves out of a job, do they?
No, certainly not. But that's why we want to create a bridge between practical knowledge, empirical knowledge, and synthesize it with the bureaucratic knowledge, the models, and we can prove that.
You're going to sell that to the people as well, to put pressure on the politicians.
In parallel, yes. So that's why we created an NGO, and then we put work into speaking with the scientists themselves. Because I believe that scientists are not bad people from the core. They got a government contract. They do government business, government scientists, government science. But the people themselves, and my father has a lot of experience with them. They are open to speaking about real biological information and knowledge on North Sea, also on IJsselmeer. So create a bridge between the scientists and the practical fishermen, and then in parallel educate the people.
That's something I said earlier, and I said several years ago in the Chamber of the House of Commons that we need to get the politics out of our science and get some real science back into our politics. Then we're on a good footing.
From the field, because what is superior than model knowledge and science knowledge if you back it up with real practical knowledge?
Well, we just know now from what we heard in America yesterday that they said for 60 years we've been misled about what we should be eating, shouldn't be eating. Margarine's good, butter's bad. Now, no, it wasn't. And you needed low-fat milk, and now full-fat milk. So they do make mistakes, and there's a lot of vested interest that's turned on those mistakes. Just a coincidence that many vested interests have been helped by those mistakes.
Probably it's not coincidence.
You're starting to sound like a conspiracy theorist.
This NGO, is it from ERC or is it from all the fishermen?
No, it's shrimp fisheries, and I just joined the first time 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, and maybe we can meld together IJsselmeer knowledge and with shrimp knowledge, and
they can show that the government needs them to fill the models.
Yeah.
And the models are then not in their negative for the fishermen, because it is the reality. And be born. Please do not go start a war with the government. Like the French farms now with their protests in Paris. It's not working. The public in the beginning is understanding what the problem of the farmers is, but then they are getting bored, and the president orders the army to shoot the farmers away and clean streets.
Maybe it's what they want, because it's a very simplistic reaction from people that are fishing and farming, to get angry at the government and then attack them, and then they can frame them as Neanderthals people.
Yeah, they are scared of the farmers though, because around the world, they generally have got some quite useful kit. That's why they're scared of the farmers. They're just the government in UK have just had to row back a bit on the inheritance tax issue. They've upped the threshold to £2.5 million pounds per farm before they start paying inheritance tax. But that's only really like a burglar stealing all your belongings and then coming and giving you half of them back. They're just trying to placate them because they're worried. It doesn't matter which country I was in. There's an assault on farmers in Australia and New Zealand. Exactly the same. It is on the food supply.
It's the food supply. It seems to come from the United Nations.
But if you wanted a conspiracy theory, I'll give it to you. There's half the world they can't control because they've got no internet, and that's the poor half of the world. And when they have a worldwide food shortage, those poor people in that half of the world, they won't have much food at all. They won't be able to buy any, and that's going to be a disaster for them. And they're all going to be heading here anyway, because they think we're the land of milk and honey. And That's what the plan is, to destabilise. Because they can't control that half of the wilderness. They got no cameras, they got no internet, they got no infrastructure. Putting the price of fertiliser up enormously is limiting what they can do.
But they are working on it. We have some relations via zendelingen, missionaries in Afrika. En Ashling Kobe Visser van de Tere. And they learned the Bushmen in Africa. They had a special a click language.
Yes. Yeah.
Those two people from Urk went there 50 years ago. They are now retired and old. 50 years ago, they vocalized that click language and they made their own alphabet. And from there, they start to write the Bible for the people there. But they learned them also English. Now the reality is the grandmas, with the grandchildren, are sitting on Sunday in the church, and the young men and the fathers are on the marketplace because there is a high mast, an antenna, where they can reach internet. And with the language the missionaries learned them, they are now streaming internet. So that is a two-way function. I brought them a language, the Bible, but also English. And you see immediately the vision, the grandpas with the grandchildren are in church, and young guys are colonizing internet.
Yeah.
So the big money from the world is reaching more and more also very remote places. They are rolling internet everywhere out.
Yeah, also with this microcredit system.
Microcredit,
Yeah.
or Queen, Maxima is the spokesperson from, is very scary.
So they give women mobile phones so they can run a business, like a one-person business, but that's how they implement this whole internet sort of commerce.
And with the microcredit, they are taxable, otherwise not.
Yeah.
So, but Bob de Wit, from Society 4.0, you know him?
4.0.
He's like a professor of an institute. He wrote an alternative way of.
He said that the big government, the mondial government, you don't stop them anymore. There's too much power, too much money, but that creates space to start local again.
Oh, the answers have got to come from the ground up.
From the ground up.
It's never going to come out of your parliament or our parliament.
Forget it.
No.
There's no chance.
No.
That's what I learned too, and I want to say
So
something.
well, not where the answer's going to
Like
come
you
from.
just said, is the internet. The globalists use internet as a great tool.
They monitor it. They monitor.
Yeah,
they know
people.
what the people are thinking all the time.
But the shift what you're talking about in America is it's coming out from the same tool. Internet is going to get used against them
Yes.
because the normal
Well,
people.
that's why Keir Starmer wants to ban X.
Yeah, but the lower class is also reaching information very easy, and that's
And,
going in the long term.
nobody
it's-
trusts the
it's go-
BBC or.
It's going to work
Anybody
against
else.
them in the long term, and it's
Yeah.
also with this all these regulations, and they are talking negatively over the fishery. I see you see it everywhere on a global scale that the shifting is going to us, because people don't use or they don't believe the regular media anymore.
Well, I think we're going to see a shift in food habits and aspirations, and I think it is going to be more for farmers. It's going to be more for real fishermen, and the provenance of knowing where your food came from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's going to be more and more important.
Yeah, the price is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you want good food, I mean,
Yeah.
the sad thing is that the worst food available in the shops is the cheapest food.
Yeah.
I mean,
Ultra
good
processed.
food is more expensive, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a child, you didn't need to have organic food because it was all organic. now you have to buy organic food,
Yeah.
don't you? Well, it should all be.
Yeah, but
Better than that.
that's the problem from the supermarket. The supermarket is ultra processed food and very cheap. So when you will eat very good organic food, you have to pay more, and not in the supermarket, until there is growing a new market, and the supermarket thinks, hey, we can profit from this, and then there comes a room in the supermarket with organic food. Oh, you better start.
And
local
you said
with your
you have
farm.
to sell your catch has to go to the market
Now it has to be divided in sections.
in sections.
So they're on a sieve, and then at the end you get your kilos.
That's and another inspector.
I heard some shrimp fisher say to me there are permits for the Waddenzee that you're on the Waddenzee and then you're out on the North Sea. And that with these handing in of the boats, you can buy the permits.
There are licenses for in the North Sea.
Yeah.
And there are licenses in the Waddenzee, and there also in the Waddenzee and the North Sea. And the North Sea, if you've got only the North Sea, you can't go in. You can only go on the coast, and then you can go to Denmark and Germany, everywhere. But you can only go outside. If you've got the inside sea license, and you only have that one, you have a small boat normally, and it's not the same rules as the bigger boats. We've got once a year you have to go, there comes a person on board and checks everything, and if everything's okay, then you get your okay, and then you can go fishing again. And that's not for the inside sea, if you only have the inside sea license. But if you got the inside sea license and the North Sea license, then you have to have that also, the control.
Yeah.
And the smaller ones are all gone, I think, at the end of the year, of in maybe February, March.
So even if you got the permit, you couldn't because your boat would be too big, or
It's really complicated. You've got a small boat, you've got a big boat.
Mhm.
If you have a small boat and you want to buy a big boat, you need the tonnage,
the weight.
license.
the license, and you need the shrimp license for the tonnage,
Okay.
and you need the license. So you need to have, if you got two small boats, you can buy them both and connect them and buy a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And so you're shrinking the fleet.
Yeah.
And if you got a small one now, with the buyout thing, you can change the license, and you don't need the tonnage, because I don't know if they don't need it. I'm really not really sure.
Ik denk dat zij bedoelt dat of het overdraagbaar is.
Yeah,
Like
you can.
It is transferable.
Okay.
But you need, if you want to go into the uitkoop, in the
Payment. That you
Payment?
get, yeah.
you need a boat, a license, and you
Okay.
have to put them all in.
Yeah.
But if it's a license from outside or inside sea, that doesn't matter.
And they're scrapping the boats.
And they're scrapping the boats and taking the license in.
Yeah. So the total amount of licenses are shrinking.
Reduced to,
Yeah.
I think 135 now.
But wouldn't it make more money to sell the boat than to do this?
They did that in the 19 boats. They were before, because that was a national agreement from the government and the Waddenzee, Stichting Waddenzee.
Yeah.
And they could only put in their license and get money for that. But that was then, like now, if they put in all, they can get between, It depends on how much fishing they did, between 5 and 800,000 euros. And with the license and keeping the boat in the period before, it was only 400 for the license.
And there you see the big difference between, for example, wind,
So
wind farms.
just check on something. Okay, so you've got these people who've said we want to finish 19 boats. Say, what happens if somebody who's got a boat says, actually, I want to buy your license and I want to buy your boat,
Then you buy the whole thing. Then that's
and then they drop all your quota again, though.
Yeah, but now it was a buyout, and the last time it was only a buyout from the licenses. So there were 120 boats still, 220 boats, and 19 and a couple of loose licenses to fish trips were available to go away.
Yeah.
And the boats stayed, and also a couple of the boats that stayed without the license were changed by another boat, and then they put the license on that one.
Yes.
But the licenses were gone, so you can't get another license anymore.
No.
So it's reduced to 135.
And is there ever going to be a mechanism under the EU system for anybody to have a new license?
No, you can't.
Because it's never going to be that there's going to be any.
It's closed off now.
The model is that there's never going to be sufficient.
No, but it's only in Holland that it's closed off. So in Holland there never will be more than 135.
Only ever less.
And only less. But in Germany you can still get a license, even if the boats are still there. And there's there's a buyout this year in February, but.
And whose interest is that in then to discriminate against the Dutch fishermen in favour of the,
We are ruled by our own
You'd have to
rules.
stop buying their cars.
Yeah.
It's the same globalist club.
Yes.
But they are.
There's a 3-state city.
Oh, well that's.
Yeah, but it's all in the bigger picture.
Their rules.
Because
At least they haven't introduced wolves onto the sea. To help you.
No, we've got wind turbines instead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we see, to end the official part of this meeting, we see a movement that the small companies, the family companies, they don't see any horizon anymore. The regulations, the burdens are too heavy.
It's just survival.
They can't give the company on the offspring, the children, so they end their business. And then greater business, mostly foreign business, are buying their rights.
Well, I mean, if
but not the ships. I mean, I find it such a waste.
If the current generation are not happy in the industry because of the regulatory burdens, they're not going to encourage their next generation to get. They're going to tell them to go to university, become an accountant or a lawyer, and
or work for the government.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, that's an oxymoron, though, isn't it? It's like working for the government.
Maar